He was one of the youngest sultans of the Ottoman Empire. That's why he was called Osman the Young. At the age of 14, he ascended the Ottoman throne as a promising Ottoman sultan, and at the age of 18, he was deposed by a rebellion by rebels. Then he was taken to 7-tower dungeons after being paraded through the streets of Istanbul like a criminal. The disrespect was so great that according to some rumors among the people, there were even those who coveted the rape of the Ottoman Sultan in the 7-tower dungeons. So were these rumors, which had been rumored for generations, true? Here's what happened to Sultan Osman the Young in the dungeons. Osman II was born on November 3, 1604 in Istanbul as the first male prince of Sultan Ahmed I. Since he was the first son, much attention was paid to him, and his education was given great importance. In addition to Arabic and Persian, his mother Mahfiruze Hatice Sultan, of Greek origin, taught him languages such as Latin, Greek, and Italian. Although there was an opposing power, such as Kösem Sultan and her princes on one hand, Prince Osman is mentioned in the reports of the Venetian ambassadors as the wisest and most cultured of the princes. It all started with the unexpected death of his father Sultan Ahmed I at the age of 27. According to the custom, since the foundation of the Ottoman Empire, Osman, the eldest prince of Ahmed I, was entitled to the throne. However, since Sultan Ahmed I abolished the law of fratricide during his reign and replaced it with the system of the eldest sane member of the family becomes the sultan, and since he pardoned his brother Mustafa I, the sultanate passed from father to brother for the first time in Ottoman history. As a result, Mustafa I was declared sultan. However, there was something strange about the new sultan. He talked to fish in a pond and sometimes threw gold at them. Since Mustafa I had been living in constant fear of being killed since his childhood, his mood was disturbed, and he was not in a condition to be a sultan. Upon realization of this situation by state officials, Mustafa I was deposed 96 days after he ascended to the throne. Thus, on February 26, 1618, 14-year-old Prince Osman was declared sultan. Despite his young age, he was a sultan who was aware of state problems and wasn't afraid of innovations. As soon as he ascended to throne, he changed all senior statesmen in the state and closed taverns and drinking places. He also went against palace traditions and became the first Ottoman sultan in centuries to have marriage with a free Muslim Turkish girl outside the palace rather than with concubines and harem. In the following years, he wanted to completely abolish the harem, which he regarded as a nest of rumors, and enact new laws by changing legislation that had been outdated since the reigns of Sultan Mehmed the Conqueror and Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent. The innovations up to this point had made Sultan a very unpopular character. What he wanted to do next, namely abolish Janissary Corps and remove devshirs from the state affairs, would be the beginning of the rebellion that would lead him to disaster. When Osman ascended to the throne, he sent Kösem Sultan to the Old Palace. However, Kösem's eldest son handed his brother Prince Mehmed to executioners before going on Hoshin expedition because he saw him as a rival. When Prince Mehmed saw executioners coming to take his life, he said, "Osman, I wish by Allah that your life may be ruined. You deprived me of my life. I hope you will not be able to reign." He cursed. Sultan Osman II's murder of his brother was not welcomed by the state and the people. In 1621, 12 days after this incident, a disastrous cold hit Istanbul, and after days of snow, the Bosphorus was completely frozen. Since the ships could not enter the strait, famine started, and the people of Istanbul were left in need of a single piece of dry bread. In this period called the Little Ice Age, wolves and deer descended on the streets of Istanbul, and rumors spread that terrible creatures kidnap people, so there was a period when children were forbidden to go out on the streets. Of course, the Ottoman people saw Sultan Osman the Young as the one responsible for all this, and he started to be nicknamed as the Sinister Sultan. In the same year, when he was about to embark on the Hochin expedition, a solar eclipse occurred. Normally in the Ottomans, going on an expedition before or after a solar eclipse was considered a bad omen. However, Sultan Osman II went against tradition and did not take this superstition seriously and continued the expedition without heeding the advice. However, something else was noticed during the Hochin campaign. Janissaries, who were not in the expedition, were made to appear as if they were present by the Janissary commanders, and their wages were taken. In order to identify these people, Sultan Osman had the whole army pass in front of him 3 times at different times and took a roll call. Janissary commanders started to be hostile to the Sultan, both because their wages were cut and because of this situation, which they found humiliating. The Battle of Hochin was prolonged due to the reluctance of the army. Enemy trenches could not be captured, and Janissaries did not fully commit themselves to war, which led to war not being concluded. And finally, a peace treaty was signed, and the army returned to Istanbul. After the Hochin expedition, which he considered as a failure, young Sultan had an idea to completely abolish Janissary Corps, which was composed of devshirets, and create a new military organization with Turks to be recruited from Anatolia, Egypt, and Damascus. Thereupon, Osman planned to go to Anatolia under the pretext of going on pilgrimage and abolish Janissary Corps by gathering soldiers from Damascus, Egypt, and Anatolia. However, the announcement of this plan was the beginning of the end for Osman. Seeing their existence in danger, some of the Janissaries rebelled by raising cauldron. They gathered in Sultan Ahmed Square and demanded Sultan not to go to Hajj, not establish new army, and heads of 6 of his close men. Sultan Osman, who was young and inexperienced and did not have any precautions, refused demands firmly by relying on his sultanate. Rebellion grew, and even more rebels stormed Topkapi Palace, seized Mustafa I, and declared him sultan. Black David Pasha, investigator of rebellion, was declared Grand Vizier. Losing all his power on the throne in an instant, Osman took refuge in Janissary Corps as the last resort. Although Chief Janissary Ali Aga tried to stop rebellion, he was massacred by 65th Company of Janissaries. The organizer of the 65th Company was Grand Vizier Black David Pasha. Captured by the 65th Company of Janissaries, deposed, Sultan's clothes were torn, his offhands were tied, his turban was taken away, and finally, he was put on a donkey driven through the streets of Istanbul. After the disgrace in the streets, he was first taken to the mosque, where there were several attempts to strangle him by the rebels, but some Janissary masters in the army did not consent to the Sultan's murder and prevented it. Thereupon, Grand Vizier Black David Pasha promised that the Sultan would not be assassinated and put him on the back of a market cart and took him to the fortress of the 7 Towers. The 18-year-old young Sultan did not come out of the fortress of the 7 Towers alive. Although he struggled with a few rebels and defeated them, the slaughter of the Sultan is described as follows in the work called Naima Tarihi, written by Naima Effendi, who lived at that time. Osman II resisted for a long time against those who wanted to kill him, but during the struggle, one of the rebels neutralized the Sultan by squeezing his balls and was strangled to death with a lasso thrown around his neck. After the Sultan was murdered, his ear was cut off by Grand Vizier Black David Pasha and taken to Sultan Mustafa I's mother-in-law. The claim that Sultan Osman was raped was put forward much later in the 20th century. According to rumors, Evliya Celebi narrated this incident in his travelogue, but historian Necip Azim Yaziziks tore out this page to prevent Turks from learning about it. However, The fact that there is more than one copy of the travelogue and that there is no information about Osman II being raped in other copies shows that rape allegation does not reflect truth. As for Black David Pasha and the 65th Janissary Company, who did all this to an Ottoman Sultan, Black David Pasha, who had the blood of a sultan on his hands, was executed a few months later. All the soldiers of the 65th Company of Janissaries were massacred, and the 65th Company was cancelled from the army.